Good evening, everyone. My name is Mona Rahimi, and I am a grief recovery method specialist certified from Grief Recovery Method Institute, a nonprofit organization established over 38 years ago to help grievers with loss. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming, for being here. Thank you for caring for the well-being and happiness of our children, of your children. I know you're here because you want to develop a lifelong, healthy response to loss for your children. Tonight, I'm going to talk about grief. I'm going to talk about recovery, about loss, and I'm going to talk about the fact that experiencing loss is not a lifetime sentence, and you can recover from a loss. And finally, I'm going to talk about how, as adults, we can help our children process loss and move on. I would like to start with, what is grief? Grief is a normal and natural reaction to loss. So to grieve is to feel sadness, to feel pain, and to feel that it is okay for you to be sad, and it is so okay to cry. And I put emphasis on the word feel because nowadays it is so much about not feeling, about seeking ways to stop feeling. Yes, unfortunately, we've been socialized to believe that these feelings of sadness and pain are abnormal and unnatural. The topic of grief recovery is usually dealt with fear and misinformation. Did you know that each year, 8 million people become new grievers owing to death alone? And there are so many other losses that could cause grief. We at Grief Recovery Method Institute, or GRM, have identified over 41 losses. Losses like death, divorce, abuse, end of addiction, health changes, financial changes, moving to a new neighborhood, moving to a new school, adjusting to a new culture, learning a new language, losing a prized possession, or just a few of these losses. For a child, it could be as simple as losing a doll. So as you see, loss is inevitable, and throughout our lives, from childhood to adulthood, we experience different losses. But unfortunately, we have very little helpful information on what to do when we lose. There are plenty of information on what to do when we gain, but nothing helpful on what to do when we lose. So now I would like to take a look at recovery. What is recovery? When John James, the founder of GRM, lost his son in early 70s, he assumed that because loss was such a common occurrence that there would be people around him that could help him process his grief, that there would be useful information that he could use to get better. But very soon he discovered that most people offered was intellectual in nature. But the thing was that his brain wasn't broken, his heart was. So all this intellectual advices and information he was receiving was not helping him with recovery. He felt sadness and grief, and he was told to move on, but like many, he did not know how to. After a few years, when he came up with Grief Recovery Institute, many argued and contested that it is not possible to recover. They even thought that it was questionable to use grief and recovery in the same sentence, let alone expect to recover. So what is this recovery that people do not think is possible? Recovery means feeling better. Recovery means claiming your conditions instead of your circumstances, claiming you and your happiness. Recovery means when you're stuck in an emotional place and you think you cannot move on, that you really can. Recovery does not mean that we forget. It means acknowledging that it is perfectly all right to feel sad from time to time and talk about those feelings without regret or remorse and without fear of how those around us would react and judge. Of course, recovery from a significant emotional loss is not an easy task, but it is doable. We at GRM believe it is possible to regain the sense of well-being in our lives in spite of the losses we have experienced. This is achieved by a series of small and correct educational choices made by the griever and by a practical set of actions given by GRM specialists to the grievers to take, so rather than sitting and waiting for time to heal their wound, they will take these steps to get better, and these actions would allow the griever not to be paralyzed into inaction, the inaction that makes them get stuck in a place where they feel impossible to move on and get better. So you ask how recovery is possible. I just mentioned that we need to take a series of steps to get better. The first step, the most important step, is for us to recognize and accept that a lot of the old information and habits we have acquired over the years, starting from our childhood all through our adulthood, is not helpful at all in grief recovery. At GRM, we refer to these unhelpful information as myths. Yes, they are myths because on a daily basis we see that they do not work. We think they help us with our losses because we've been seeing our parents, our friends, teachers, religious leaders use them, say them, so we assume that they help, but they truly don't. A few examples of these myths are: be strong, don't cry, keep yourself busy, replace your loss with, and there's always a list of things that come after that, give it time, be grateful for, again, a list of things that follow. These are a few of the myths we as grievers use for recovery. There are more, but I guess you get the picture. We need to recognize that we have been so conditioned to transform our emotions into intellect that we think we are defective for having feelings at all. Result? We look for ways to stop feeling. Another step to recovery is realizing that we have experienced a loss and realizing that this loss is affecting our lives and not in a good way, and then accepting responsibility for getting better. Yes, the loss might not have been our fault, which in most cases that is true, but getting better is our responsibility. We did not have control over the loss, but we do have control over getting better. Once we do all of this, recognizing the myths, learning new information, accepting that we want to get better, it is then that we become prepared to take the final steps to complete our relationship with pain and move forward. And of course, we at GRM will provide you with guidelines and help finish your relationship with pain, complete the pain, and achieve recovery. This is GRM in a nutshell. Now, part of GRM, we have an amazing program called When Children Grieve for Adults. Tonight, we are here to talk about this program, a program designed for parents, teachers, social workers, caretakers, school counselors, or any adult that deal with children. A very helpful program. Before I tell you about this program, I would like to share with you results of a research done by Harvard University, which was published very recently. Harvard University conducted a 75-year research on how to be happy and published the result less than a year ago. The research was done on two groups. One group consisted of Harvard graduates, people that were financially secured. The other group consisted of people that were financially insecure, or in other words, they were poor. Regardless of the financial status, they concluded that the key to happiness are two things. Number one, love. Well, I guess we could have told them that. But nowadays, it is important to support findings with proven data, so there you have it. And number two is finding a way of coping with life that would not push love away. This second result is what we at GRM can help people with. This is what we concentrate on. So if you find love in a form of a relationship, but you undergo a trauma, like losing a child, losing a parent, losing a brother, sister, losing a job, or any other loss, and you don't deal with that trauma, you could end up coping in a way that pushes love away. We see that in all relationships that are not working, relationships between parents and their children, between couples, between friends, we see this trying to push love away. They at Harvard University recommend to take personal growth very seriously, to be available for connection and not push love away. In simple terms, we need to process our grief so that once we find love, we are able to manage a better relationship, and that will help us keep love to be happy. That's what Harvard's research was all about. There it is. Simple yet not so simple, right? The love part is simple. We all fall in love and it is an important part of our lives. But to be able to process our losses the right way so that we wouldn't push love away, isn't that what we want for our children? To hold on to their connections. We want them to be happy and available emotionally and be able to maintain this connection. I know we all try, but we don't succeed all the time because we don't know as parents, as teachers, as people that are in contact with children, how to do that, how to help process our children's grief so they become and remain connected emotionally. To tell you the truth, I spent a few sleepless nights thinking about what could I possibly tell you that would be new and you haven't heard before. We have a psychologist here. We have a few people from social services industries, an amazing high school principal, a lawyer, a doctor, a manager, and a few wonderful mothers, fathers, sisters, grandparents. Most of you deal with children and try to help them. The only thing that I could think of was that I have gone through a loss, a trauma that emotionally makes me understand grief and look at it differently. And when going through the trauma, I had a 10-year-old child that went through it. To become GRM certified, I had to go through the program myself. And my broken heart broke again for not knowing of this program 12 years ago and not being able to help my 10-year-old daughter with what she experienced in a better way, in a more efficient way, the right way. Yes, over 12 years ago, in a massive house fire, I lost my 7-year-old son, and I almost died trying to save him. My daughter survived without any harm. I experienced third-degree burns, My lungs were damaged, and I was in an induced coma for 2 weeks. But when I opened my eyes in that hospital, I was faced with this dilemma. How do I go on? How do I raise one child when I just lost another? Of course, I was showered with love and good wishes. People came to visit me from all over the world, literally. But it was then that I realized what John James had realized after losing his son, that with all the good intentions and intellectual advices that I was receiving, I was not feeling better. With a loss like that, you feel numb and accept all people have to offer because you don't know what else to do, right? You think they should help, but deep down you're sad. Yes, they sound logical and they apply to your intellect, but they don't help because they don't apply to your heart. And it is your heart that is broken. I heard all the myths that I talked about a few minutes ago. I was told to be strong. I was told not to let my daughter see my tears, not to talk about my son. They decided not to mention his name, thinking that this would help me forget my son. They said replace the pain with, and there was a list of things to do. They even said, have another child. Unfortunately, my daughter was receiving similar advices. Keep busy, be your mom's support, be strong, be a big girl. Wow, what a tremendous burden this was for a 10-year-old child. I, with 100% confidence, can tell you that none of these helped us with recovery. That's why we call them myths. They don't work. We assume they work without questioning its validity. It's not been proven that they work. As mentioned before, these are the old habits and information that we need to recognize and replace. So as a griever, when we are labeled strong, and of course show of emotions is considered a weakness, and because we're afraid of being judged, and because we're afraid of being labeled weak, we start to act recovered. I mean, an award-winning acting that convinces even ourselves that we are okay. Last week, I read an article with this title, Are You Strong Enough to Be Weak? And the writer, Lance Decker, who is a GRM specialist, who has lost his son, very brilliantly explained that when you experience a loss, the essential factor in getting better is being able to show sad emotions. And if society calls that a weakness, then let them. He mentions that in grief recovery, it is weakness that heals the broken heart. It is weakness that shows a person strength, stamina, and courage to heal. Yes, we have to endure periods of pain for proper healing. And he gives this example that is just wonderful, that he had to go through a surgery, and part of this recovery was to get physical therapy that was extremely painful. He knew that this pain was necessary for his physical healing. Exceptionally put, it's true for emotional healing as well. It would have been a blessing if I knew all of this 12 years ago when my daughter was grieving, but now, because I went through it all, because we went through it all, and because now I have a helpful guideline that actually works, I want to be able to help other adults that experience what I experienced with recovery of their children. Honestly, what I heard during my loss was very familiar. I probably would have said and done the same because we are raised with these ideas. And when we face loss, the first thing we do is we tap into our stored information and use it. And again, that's why we need to unlearn what we have learned that is not helpful and replace it with new information. So when this tapping is happening, we are retrieving the right information, helpful information. I know the hardest thing in the world is to see our children in emotional distress. We want to fix the problem. We want to make it go away. So when our children come home from school, upset and sad and crying because of something that has happened at school, and because we don't like to see them sad, we say, don't feel bad, don't feel sad, have a cookie. This comes from an authority as far as children are concerned. We are parents and we are the authority. So as soon as we tell them, don't feel bad or don't feel sad, we have officially dismissed what they're feeling. And we're telling them not to feel, but to replace. Yes, it starts with small incidences, but it adds up. Just think about how many times as adults we have done this. We do it when a pet dies. We say, don't feel sad. We can go and get another one. So feelings are compromised during all of this. And this is how, by the age of 15, children hear not to feel the way they feel over 25,000 times. It's automatic, it's small, but we do it, and over a long period of time, it gets carved into their brain that they should not feel the way they feel, and they should replace, and they should act recovered. Hearing not to feel the way they feel is not only not comforting, but it's very confusing. They are sad and they're afraid that we might think that they're not strong enough or good enough or tough enough for us, for their friends. So yes, they're very afraid of being judged. So they start to act recovered. Aren't we all afraid of being judged even as adults? We fear that. When we say be strong or don't cry to a child, we're telling them not to feel the pain they're feeling in that very moment in their heart. And we're shifting their emotions. We're shifting them from feeling, which is in their heart, to their brains. And we're changing them to adults overnight. As Russell Friedman, the other co-founder of GRM, always says, when your heart is broken, your head does not work. Children need to feel bad when their heart is broken. They need to know that for the moment, sad is not bad. Sad is just part of being normal. So when we tell them, give it time, or don't feel sad, we're telling them to do nothing for the pain they're feeling at that moment. So what we need to do is we need to free our children from the false idea that not feeling bad is okay, and to empower them with positive and effective methods. Edwin S. Cox, PhD, President Emeritus from Phillips Graduate School, says about this program, in my 25 years of training family therapists, I have never seen a more useful tool for helping children deal with loss. This program transcends traditional thinking about helping children grieve. In practical, everyday language, the founders present an action-oriented program that provides concrete suggestions of things to say and do with the child to help acknowledge the loss and to complete the process of grieving in the healthiest of ways. And Bernard McGrain, PhD, Professor of Sociology, Chapman University, and University of California at Irvine, says, once in a generation, a program comes along that alerts the way society views a topic. We teach our children to read, write, and do math, so their lives will be successful. While gains are important, Loss is unavoidable. Sadly, we do not always teach our children useful skills to deal with the feelings caused by losses, large or small, mainly because we don't know how. When Children Grieve for Adults is an essential primer for parents and others who interact with children on a regular basis. So what is so different about this program that makes two psychology scholars talk and praise it like that? When children grieve and their hearts are broken, we at GRM firmly believe that they need to be heard, not fixed. Not knowing how to verbalize their emotions, they try to tell us by different behaviors. These behaviors are their way of communicating, but we as adults, unintentionally, I hope, and because we don't know how to interpret these behaviors, we dismiss them. And by doing that, we dismiss their feelings. I'm sure that we want to acknowledge these feelings if we knew how, but we are kind of lost ourselves. As these scholars said, we just don't know how to make them verbalize their emotions. So when they start these behaviors, this is really important. We assume they are acting up. They are misbehaving. We say, but they're doing drugs, or they're hanging out with the wrong crowd, not knowing that these are the signs of an emotional trauma. So at this point, the original grief gets dismissed and the focus gets shifted to child's behavior, which is seen incorrectly as a disciplinary problem rather than a grief problem. You see how it gets rerouted? So many times we have disciplined our kids for the wrong reason. So when we as adults do not acknowledge what our children are emotionally going through, our children will have undelivered emotional communications, which creates an emotional incompleteness, which results in misbehavior. See the cycle? So what we need to do is we need to find this emotional incompleteness and help them complete it so they can move on. These undelivered emotions is in their hearts. It's been buried there sometimes for many years. It's been pushed down, of course, and it will create misbehavior. And then there's this energy that is produced when children are grieving. This confusing energy, it is like a kettle getting to a boiling point, but we put a cork in it so it can't let the steam out. What happens to the kettle? The kettle will explode. The cork is all the myths we have been using for recovery. The cork is the fact that we think emotions should not be communicated. And when I say should not, I mean we give that impression that it should not. This steam needs to come out somehow. If it does not come out the right way, it will come out as what we call it, acting up. This is GRM's main focus, to help children let the steam out, per se. This program teaches the adults to assist children with that. How do we do that? As adults, our job is to acknowledge and assist children in recognizing, accepting, and dealing with the truth of these painful feelings which they're experiencing. We do that by establishing trust with children so they feel safe to talk about their emotions. And again, how do we do that? We do that by being honest about our emotions, by going first. Kids are very smart and know if we are pretending, so they definitely follow our lead and start pretending that they're okay. Actually, this is exactly like being on a plane, and in case of an emergency landing, we're asked to put our masks first so we can help our children. In this case, we're taking off the mask of untruthful emotions so our children can follow our lead. Have you noticed that holding on to pain takes a lot more energy than letting it go? I would like to ask you all to make a fist and hold on tight. Okay, some of you are turning red. It is very uncomfortable, right? Now let it go. It feels good, right? So why is it that we don't let go? It definitely makes us feel better. It is because most people do not know how. When something happens and we feel bad or sad, we have learned that we are not supposed to feel that way, that we push the feeling down or away and try to replace the loss with a parallel relationship. And then sadly, that becomes a new behavior, which in most cases is not a good behavior. We refer to these behaviors as Terps, short-term energy-releasing behavior. This can become a beginning of an incorrect habit for dealing with grief. What happens to the actual sad feeling, the tangible energy produced by the sad feeling, it gets covered up, waiting for the wrong stimulus to trigger an explosion, our kettle. Some of the disturbs for children are anger, use of recreational drugs, fantasy like playing video games, watching movies, doing excessive exercises, isolate, excessive eating, not eating enough. So these are a few behaviors that children develop. So now that we know about myths, now that we can identify disturbs and know it's because of the effect of unresolved grief, it's time to help our children discover and communicate these emotions by establishing and reviewing their relationships with their losses. We will provide you with an emotional energy checklist, which helps you, the adult, to remind children of the kinds of events that might have produced that emotional energy in their personal relationship. So in a simpler term, just sitting around and talking about the loss, finding out what happened, talking about how you feel by going first. You will create an absolutely no judgment, and I cannot emphasize enough about that so that children can talk about their feelings. Whatever they say or you say is going to remain unjudged. This is how they discover their relationship with the loss. This is how they discover the things they wish had been said or done differently, better or more, in regard to their loss. Because when you lose a parent, a child, a brother, a sister, there is all these hopes and dreams that is going to be lost. So we need to become aware of these unrealized hopes that we are constantly thinking of. We need to become aware that we wish we had a different past. Wish, for example, that we had gone fishing with Grandpa, which is never going to happen. This is where children and even adults get stuck with wanting a different past and getting frustrated for not getting it. And making these discoveries about these wishes can be used to help complete what is emotionally unfinished. And finally, it is time to communicate the undelivered emotions attached to the loss and complete these emotions. Of course, we will assist you to help and guide your children with completing their emotions. Please do remember that we cannot force our children to recover. The choice is theirs. Our children have habituated the idea that it's not safe to feel bad. And worse, they're scared of feeling bad in front of others. So if we show them that we're willing to be open and honest about our feelings in front of the others, this is how we will provide them with a safe environment. And they realize that they can trust us and they will follow our lead. Please remember that discovery and becoming aware is not recovery. Discovery is the start of completion to recovery. So we discover, then we deliver, we complete our relationship with pain and say goodbye to the pain, then we recover. It is very important that when we are establishing trust with our children, that we let them know that when they think about the loss and that relationship with the loss, that there could be good feelings and bad feelings. And there might be some guilt about the bad feelings, and that is absolutely okay. Because not all relationships are nice and peachy. We go through ups and downs, and they need to be aware that that's okay. This is all part of the discovery and part of becoming aware of what their relationship is with the loss. And after this discovery, we at GRM recommend that they write a letter, and in this letter, there are 4 categories that they will cover, and this is how they complete, and this is how they recover. And we do this with as many losses as they experience. We teach them that it's okay to feel, good or bad. And this is how we equip them with the right tool so that they can easily make that emotional connection that leads to a better life. This is how we help them with that second finding of the Harvard research, finding that way to cope with life that would not push love away. This is how they succeed in their relationship, and this is how they remain happy in life. And this is how I recovered. After going through this program, this is how I realized that loss is not a life sentence, that we have control over getting better, and I got better. Thank you for being here, and thank you for listening.